I had to post angrily on LinkedIn earlier this week
Mhm.
because some of the people I follow are posting a whole bunch about Minnesota,
Yeah.
and some of the people I follow are talking about a law to tax gains on qualified small business stock that was introduced in this Washington legislature this past week,
Mhm.
and how they want to oppose it because it will kill startups or whatever. I'm like, I simply cannot care about that right now.
Mhm.
The California billionaires tax is another one where it's like everyone's gonna hate it, and all the people will move out of the state because they don't want to pay taxes. And I'm like, well, maybe you should all just suck it up and pay taxes. Like, I don't.
Right?
I think also some of the argument, like especially the Silicon Valley
Mhm.
stuff, is like
Yeah.
we need to have all the billions theirs here because they're funding our whole startup ecosystem. And if they all move to Florida or whatever, which like at least two of them have, then Silicon Valley will not exist anymore, which is like, I don't think so. There's a lot of that kind of stuff in Seattle also about all of the efforts to like tax businesses more. It's like you guys all hate small businesses and you're going to destroy the startup
Mhm.
ecosystem in Seattle such that it is. And it's I like, I also wish the startup ecosystem in Seattle was better, but I don't think taxes are the
Mhm.
problem. Hello and welcome to the Fast and Broken podcast, where we take a critical look at the fast moving world of tech and online culture. I'm Carly Rector, a software engineer and startup founder who has been trying real hard this week to believe we're not in 1984, but it's real hard sometimes.
And I'm Teresa Kramer, an MBA student, project manager, and semi-professional voice actor who likes to look for the small little highlights of good in a lot of these things. Being a native Minnesotan, for me, it's like, hey, you know what? My city's doing a pretty good job of pushing back, at
Yes.
least, at the very least. So that
Yeah.
makes me feel a little bit better.
I appreciate that a lot, and I think there are a lot
Mhm.
of silver linings about it. Like, the
Yeah.
other silver lining I saw someone say is, like,
Mhm.
impressively, people have not called the videos fake much,
Yeah.
really. Like, no one was like, "This is all just fake news," which is nice. So, like, we haven't
That is
reached
very
that
good.
threshold of reality doesn't exist yet. We just have federal officials coming out and lying straight up about things that we're acknowledging are real.
Right.
With but at least
Yeah,
they're
like
seeing some consequences for it. I don't know.
consequences from their actions coming from the establishment, maybe not, but like the polity of individuals being willing to kind of like hold them responsible for their actions. I think so.
There was at least like Greg Bavino, who is the commander of
Mhm.
large, got moved out of Minnesota,
Yeah.
sent back home, and apparently Kristi Noem got a talking to by Trump, which is like more than nothing, I guess.
On the one hand, it's like good she got a talking to, but on the other hand, she probably got a talking to of like, how dare you fail at this, which is like, you know.
Yeah, but yeah, to bring it back around to theoretically the topics of this podcast, the Hard Fork podcast also talked about Minnesota a lot this week, despite being a tech
Mhm.
podcast. And their angle on it, which I want to take also, is like how tech leaders are cowards, which is a bunch of stuff that we've talked
Yeah.
about lately. Because it's like Trump's first term, you saw a lot of CEOs speaking out about some of the stuff
Yeah.
that he was doing when people were not being shot in the street. And yet we
Mhm.
hear nothing now. So that's cool. There is this petition, iceout.tech is the URL for it, which is for tech workers to sign and basically
Yeah.
call towards CEOs to speak up out about it and to talk to the White House about it because that
Mhm.
has had influence in the past, and it sounds like
Yeah.
that's the reason like ICE wasn't sent to San Francisco last
Mm.
year. So um, that I don't see that that has had much impact yet, but it's still going, and I have signed it, and I recommend anyone who's listening to this podcast and hasn't signed that also.
Yeah.
Um, Statements we've seen from tech CEOs so far, as far as I know, are both Tim Cook and Sam Altman have given statements internally to their employees to say that they're upset about it. And Sam Altman said like he was talking to people about it, but has made no public statement.
Mm.
And people quote Dario Abade as having made a statement about it, which I wouldn't necessarily say is true. When he was posting the link to his long essay about AI that he posted, he like alluded to it in the sense of like, given the
Mhm.
horrors in Minnesota, the part that talks about like mass surveillance and democracy, et cetera, is especially important. which like is true, but is just like alluding to it and not actually making any direct
Yeah.
statement about it. But that's still more than literally anyone else has done. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And I mean, I don't think he intended it to be a statement about it. People are
Yeah,
just like,
yeah.
he mentioned it, which is literally more than any other tech CEO has done. So,
Right, right. Anyway.
so I think people should talk more about it. So I wanted to bring that up here at the beginning and
Mhm.
talk about it a little bit because to the extent of the whatever 100 people who listen to this podcast, we can talk to them and maybe
Yeah.
that will help. Hopefully, leaders in tech get some more pressure on it because definitely, in a general sense, workers at tech companies are way more liberal, left leaning than the
Yeah.
CEOs are, especially at some companies in particular. So there's a lot of tech workers who are in much stronger support than you would expect from just like the the perception of the tech industry is large. And I appreciate some of them organizing this petition to be like, no, actually, like, just because our CEOs are sucking up to Trump all the time doesn't mean that we think
Mhm.
that this is good. We would like them to have us fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
um, but yeah, so that's just that up front. Then we can get into our real topics for this week. So our real
Yep.
topics for this week are we'll talk a little bit about the TikTok deal, which actually closed the week before last, but fell off our agenda for last week because there's also been some more about stuff about it this week, including tech issues and people alleging that there's been changes to content moderation or shadow banning suppression. Then we'll talk about some landmark lawsuits that are happening against social media companies. There's a whole group of them that are basically product safety arguments about the social media companies have been negligent in how that they built their platforms and that has brought harm on people. The first one of those, which started in California this week,
Yeah.
and then at the end we'll talk a little bit about is OpenAI losing the AI race. We can jump into the first one, which is TikTok. So it was kind of anticlimactic almost when they announced, okay, we finally closed the deal after all of the times they postponed it. But on the 22nd, they've restructured such that TikTok is now 80% owned by, or US TikTok is now 80% owned by US uh, companies, investors. And they
Mhm.
have a board that is majority American, and they're going to give oversight to the US version of TikTok, basically. And as sort of expected, a lot of the people who are now owning TikTok are people who are friendly to Trump.
Mhm.
And then the next day they did do some terms of and conditions changes, which people were a little bit alarmist about, but reading through it myself, I was like, well, there's some stuff in there, like they're collecting location data all the time, whereas previously they said they weren't. And they talk about like we can use it for advertising more broadly, but it's not clear to me how much any of those were necessarily intentional versus just like, okay, our US lawyers are now putting in our terms of service now and not the version that they had before. But then the biggest news may or may not be related to the actual change of ownership, which is that people saw a bunch of weird behavior on TikTok, like seeing they had 0 views on their videos. Gavin Newsom actually reproduced an issue where he tried to send the word Epstein in a direct message and it didn't work.
No funny.
Just a whole bunch of that kind of stuff that everyone was just like, okay, did you immediately start censoring stuff that is in opposition to the administration, basically? And the statement was, no, they didn't. They basically just like had a data center outage in one of the Oracle data centers, and that was causing widespread technical issues, like view counts showing a 0 or people not being able to post and that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
which I mostly believe, if only because it'd be moving way too efficiently to have an effective change like the day after the transfer of
Yeah.
ownership, in my opinion. But the Epstein thing, I would believe that they badly implemented some filters because that they did say like there was a bug in some of our safety things and we fixed it and it is fixed now. You can send the word Epstein in your DMs, etc. But the sort of like broader posting issues, I do think were mostly probably technical issues for
Yeah.
real. But again, it's hard to tell because there's no transparency here. And I think there's a lot of very founded concern that we're just going to go immediately from Chinese propaganda to US propaganda and
Mhm.
censorship.
No, yeah, I think the big one that I saw popping up in my Circles was one of the updates to their privacy policy that explicitly listed citizenship or immigration status among the types of sensitive information that the platform may process. Um, and that specifically kind of like came very, very closely after the events in Minneapolis. So people, I think, were very concerned and worried about it. But it looks like, just kind of like reading some quick articles about it, that has been in place since 2024. So I
Mhm.
don't think it's anything that's necessarily new, but I think it is one of those things where it's like the timing of the update and
Yeah.
everybody being on high alert right now about that sort of thing. It's like how people didn't used to care a whole ton if you said you were going to have rights to their images and you were going to have rights to reproduce and edit those images. But
Mhm.
like once AI became a thing, then everybody was kind of like zeroed in on those terms and just like, wait, what does this mean? And it's like that's a standard terms and conditions thing. It's like not anything to be worried about. But yeah, like I think that's one
Yeah.
of the places where it's like,
And I
eh,
mean, like, I think broadly, there's plenty of reason to be concerned
oh
generally
yes,
about the amount of data that platforms are collecting on us. Just because it's
yeah,
not new
yeah.
doesn't mean it's not
Yeah, yeah,
kind
and
of
I think that
concerning, but
that's kind of like the long and short of it is like, is this a concerning thing? Like, well, it's not new, so it's like it's not like they have changed it. So it's like that's not concerning in that regard. Is it concerning that like these things may collect your citizenship status and what have you? Yeah, but I feel like that's non-unique to TikTok in this consideration. That's like a more
yeah. And I
a
mean, I guess,
broader issue with like data brokers and stuff like that.
yeah, the new concern would be that previously TikTok was a
Yeah.
private, I mean, it's still a private company, but it was a private
Hmm.
company that had no particular incentive to turn over its data to federal authorities without
Hmm.
a subpoena. And now it's run by a bunch of Trump's friends, and therefore they might just hand over data to the federal government without very
Right.
much complaint.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
which is concerning no matter what changes to the data that is being collected is. And again, it's really ironic because, like, again, theoretically,
Mhm.
the concerns about it being run by a Chinese company is that it would just hand over data to the Chinese government.
Yeah, and now it's just gonna hand over data to the American government, and so it's like, pick your dictator, you know?
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
a lot of the narrative around it is, did we just trade Chinese censorship for US government censorship? And
Yeah.
that is not fully apparent yet, but it does seem likely that the trend will be in that direction given
Yeah,
the
unfortunately. Like,
situation.
yeah, like if this had happened under a different administration, I'd be like, it's like less worried about it. But yeah, like, yeah, the fact that like the board's stacked with Trump's cronies and the fact that this deal is happening really is only because like Trump decided to push on it so heavily. Again, the broader concern here is that it's just kind of status quo right now for so many pieces of technology that we interact with to just collect excessive amounts of information about us.
Mhm.
It's like the whole thing like, hey, if the service is free, then you are the product, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and there's a whole mass surveillance apparatus concern. This is only slightly
Yeah.
related, but 404 Media was writing an article about, like, DHS systems and trends towards just trying to have a consolidated government database of all of the data that
No.
various government agencies have on you, and, like, Doge was big on that too, which is like, there are reasons that it's not like that, and that's I ICE should not have access to the IRS data,
Yeah.
and, like, we
It's
don't
checks
want
and balances.
we
Yeah.
don't want the government panopticon. That's actually explicitly a thing we don't want to happen. Well, I say we.
Yeah.
Some people do want that to happen, but I think that would be bad personally. So,
I think the people who think they want it to happen don't understand like the true psychological like detriment that is a government panopticon because like the point of the panopticon was that it was a prison. Like
mhm,
that's where the terminology comes from is like a design of a prison and the idea being that like yeah, being constantly surveilled like forces like this psychological stress upon your person where you never know when somebody's going to be observing whether or not you're breaking the law or what have you. So it's like I think even like people who are like who think they want a panopticon, they don't want a panopticon. Nobody really wants the
no,
panopticon.
yeah, and I mean, like, there's a class of people that are like, well, you just don't do anything wrong, and then you're fine. And but it's you need to understand that what is wrong is
It's very
extremely
subjective. Yeah.
subjective, yes, and
Mhm.
I promise that no matter who you are, you have not ever done anything wrong in your life by someone's
Right.
standards.
Yeah, yeah.
And it really is like a matter of what the people in power want to focus on more
Mhm.
than who is objectively doing the worst.
In a weird way, it's like, even if you're like, if you don't think that you've done anything wrong, then it's like, cool, why are you consenting to live in a prison state then?
Yeah.
Like, it's like it's and in no way does it really make any kind of like, philosophical sense of like, okay, cool, if you're like, well, I've done nothing wrong, I'm perfectly fine living in the panopticon. Like, that's basically like being you saying it's like, I've committed no crimes and I would love to live in jail for the rest of my life. And it's like, that doesn't compute, my dude, you know?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. So like there's the mass censorship concerns of US
mhm.
TikTok, and then of course there's the suppression of speech concerns. I know
Yeah.
we talked about before that a lot of the reason that the TikTok bill went forward was that Congress had gotten a presentation about there being a lot of pro-Palestinian content on TikTok,
Hmm.
and that perhaps it was brainwashing the youth into being anti-Israel, and that's why we needed to stop it. And it's like or it's free speech, and you're allowed to talk about things that are against the preferred government narrative,
Yeah,
ideally.
yeah, and also, maybe you should recognize a genocide when a genocide is happening.
Hmm.
Have you
Yeah.
thought about that? You know?
Yes. Perhaps it's not Chinese propaganda that is making everyone think that the genocide in Gaza is bad. It's the fact that genocide is bad.
Yeah,
So,
and it's the fact that there is, in fact, a genocide happening in Gaza, like, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it's
Mhm.
just so transparently about trying to control the online narratives, which is
Yeah.
just so much against the First Amendment, which I think we should still care about, ideally.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's like, and like, quite frankly, is some of this like you're maybe being a little bit too paranoid? Sure, but
yeah.
also it's like paranoia is a product of of like your circumstances and
Hmm.
environment. So it's like
Yeah.
I can't really critique anyone who's like, I'm worried about TikTok collecting my immigration status right now, because it's like that. Yeah,
Or
that
like
seems like a valid concern.
or TikTok is suppressing my posts about ICE. It's like, is
Right,
it?
right.
Like, probably not. I would say, like, when they say there's technical issues, I think that's probably true. But again, there's no way for us to tell.
No.
So, like, I say that that's true, but that's just like my instinct as a tech person who believes that it would take them a lot more work to implement
Yeah. Yeah, it's like
an effective suppression system.
you're applying Occam's razor in the situation,
Yes.
but it doesn't necessarily like negate sort of like the alternative,
Yeah, and,
because
like,
just
they
because of
could
like
be doing that,
circumstances.
and
Yeah.
there's no way we would know, basically. So,
Mhm.
like, I
Yeah.
can't fault anyone being like, "Hey, there's some weird stuff going on here. It kinda looks like blah," even if I don't think it was blah in this case. The
Mhm.
fact that it could be, and there is no way that we would be able to tell is really concerning. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that it would be like if it came out later that that was the fact, yeah, that would track. Like, it'd be a
yeah.
perfectly believable thing.
But, yeah,
Yeah. Either way, I feel like it's like no social media is super safe. Because of the business model of social media is on advertising primarily,
Mhm.
like, they're all going to be collecting your data so they can sell your data, so they can better tailor ads to you and stuff like that. And kind of to our point that we've talked about a lot, it's like the only alternative outside of advertising that seems to really exist is subscription model base. And so, yeah, so like unless there's like a subscription model and not a Nazi in charge, it's like I feel like any other social media platform is sort of like doomed to sort of like repeat this same cycle of like, yeah, they're going to sell your information. And it's really, yeah, it's just a matter of like who's on top that's sort of determining whether that's for good or for ill, which is a really terrible place to be in, just in
Yes,
general, It doesn't feel good,
it
It's
does
just
not.
this terrible
I
state of capitalism we live in.
yeah, like, possibly the thing I'm most concerned about in the current time is social media and the
Yeah.
fact that profit driven social media is driving all discourse, like not even online at this point. Another thing we haven't talked about
Hmm.
a lot, but I've been listening to a bunch of podcasts lately, is how much of ICE's tactics appear to be specifically trying to like win some online information war. Like, they're sending
Mhm.
right-wing influencers out on ice missions with phones to videotape it. They're like, they
Yeah.
have a whole bunch of like Gen Z TikTok clippers to like get their raids and be like, yeah, here's some cool action footage that we can put a copyright infringing song and slap it on X. That is to some extent the goal, which is
Yeah.
really concerning.
Yeah, yeah, which was like I mean, it's propaganda. Like,
Yeah.
it's propaganda. But it is like, yeah, it's concerning kind of the state of propaganda because it used to be that propaganda like had a bit more of a clear like the source was easier to tie to it. Like it was easier to say it's like, oh yes, that's the state newspaper, that's the state TV station, that's the state radio show. Like, yeah, they'll be playing propaganda to you and they'll be feeding you propaganda. But like, but this is kind of like bypassing that in a way.
Yeah,
And
there's
it's just kind of like making it seem like the voice of the people is the voice of the
I
propaganda.
I talked last week about Question Everything, which was one of my favorite podcasts, and they had an episode on media capture by the state. And they had a journalist on who worked in Russia for a long time and was very like familiar with the mechanisms that happened there. And she was basically like, that's what's happening here. It does not have to be the federal government is here and is just like, no, you can't publish that, or here, publish this.
Mhm.
The sort of intimidation of, say, lawsuits, or like the proliferation of stuff on social media based on algorithmic promotion of
Yeah.
particular views, and just sort of like the chilling effect of people not wanting to write about certain things, like that's
Yeah.
already capture.
Yeah.
Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be direct, and in fact, that's probably more insidious because you cannot just point to it and say like that's the state newspaper or whatever. So
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
um
It's like how CBS is
yeah.
state run basically now.
Yeah,
So,
CBS is state run. TikTok is state run.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
very concerning.
Yes.
But yeah, talking about social media being safe and
Mhm.
more broadly, we can segue to our next topic, which is about
Yeah.
product safety lawsuits for social media. So the high level here is there's a bunch of lawsuits from people who have had
Mhm.
bad outcomes from social media, and they're trying to sue the social media companies based on basically a product safety argument. And in particular, a lot of them are using the language of addiction. They're saying like social media is like cigarettes. This is like the cigarette companies. They knew this was harmful for us and they continued to do it anyway. And
Mhm.
therefore that's irresponsible, failure to warn, negligence from like a product perspective. And that is distinct from the sort of speech argument of anyone should be allowed to post whatever they want because Section 230 and the social media company is not liable for that. It's about the design of the apps themselves, the sites themselves, and how that sort of perpetuates harmful outcomes.
Mhm.
So the argument here is that things like infinite scroll, or things like sending you notifications all the time, or algorithms that promote certain things, are harmful to people directly, like a direct link to a harmful outcome, and that the social media companies knew that, and therefore they should be liable for these harms. And
Mhm.
the current one that just started is in particular a young woman. I think she's 19 or 20. She started on social media at age 10 and had like a lot of depression and body dysphoria. And this lawsuit is against TikTok, Snap, Meta, and Google for YouTube. TikTok and Snap have now settled out of court about it without acknowledging wrongdoing. So it's just Meta and YouTube that it's going
Mhm.
forward with for now. Um, and I think this is all interesting because I think I'll have a lot of mixed feelings about this. Um, I was listening to Taylor Lorenz's podcast talking about this, and she takes a pretty hard line that this is bad, and this is still all about free speech and about the content, and social media addiction doesn't exist.
Mhm.
And the analogy being like, okay, if it was Coursera that had like infinite scroll and sent you notifications, stuff like that, no one would be mad about it. It's because it's a particular kind of content. It's the content that's causing harm and not the fact that there's infinite scroll or whatever.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's still a First Amendment issue. And they're just trying to get around it and censor it by using this argument. And like, I have some sympathy for that argument because I think that is true to some extent. But it's like also, I've worked for companies building some of these features, and I was in an org where we like had to we were all set to read like this book on building habits and how to
Mhm.
build your features such that it like intercepts people at exactly the moment when they would be thinking about your product and gets them coming back every day. Because I worked at Amazon during the time that we were all like, we need to make Amazon a daily habit.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of psychological manipulation deliberately happening by
Yes.
a lot of these companies in
Yeah.
order to keep people on them more. And like, is that physiological addiction in the same way that cigarettes are? No. But it's like,
No.
but where is the line there? Taylor Lorenz is also like, people were mad about like novels. People are rereading novels all of the time, or like cliffhangers on television. Like all of those are things that are like intended to keep people engaged. And
Mhm.
where is the line between like your weekly serial had a cliffhanger at the end, so people tune in again next week, and Twitter, and
Yeah.
why should Twitter be particularly harmful here?
I think it is important to kind of like draw that distinction because yeah, like addiction is a very specific thing.
Yeah.
But I do think, like to your point, there's just kind of an inherent manipulativeness that has come out of implementing psychology and how like these tech companies think about like encouraging use of their products that is like incredibly manipulative.
Mhm.
And so it's like if you're going after the right problem but you're kind of phrasing it in a way that I don't think is doing you any
Yeah.
favors because I wouldn't call like the Twitter outrage machine like something that is like addictive per se, but I do think it's a problem. And I
Mhm.
think like that there is a problem there and the problem exists because they have sort of identified that like, oh, people engage with content that outrages them. You know, it's like
Yes.
people engage more heavily with content that makes them angry, that is more incendiary. And so let's serve more of that content to people so they continue to be on our platform for longer and we generate more ad views from it and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And it's like, and yeah, and like the like weird dopamine fixation that can come out of some of these things. I don't think it's correct really to use like the cigarette playbook because
Yeah.
it's like social media does not inherently introduce any sort of new chemical to people's brains. It does manipulate the existing chemicals in people's brains in very
Mhm.
interesting ways. And that's why kind of like, yeah, this psychological manipulation thing that a lot of tech companies are doing these days in terms of like how do we keep people more engaged? How do we get people to think of our product and like, have form habits essentially
Mhm.
is a problem. But yeah, I don't think that like your intention here is incorrect, but I don't agree with the methodology of how you're going about it because I think it points at the wrong sort of aspect of the problem to solve it and therefore makes it I think a weaker argument
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think I agree with that, and that's broadly where I land on it too, which is like I do think that there is a lot of irresponsible and harmful product decisions being made at these companies, and that it
Yeah.
is not just about the content. Getting back to the sort of like addiction narrative,
Mhm.
it's also a question there where it's like, what is the sort of like public welfare responsibility of these social media companies?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I don't think it's addiction. I think using the addiction narrative and the cigarette analogy is a bad idea. And especially because like it's not fundamentally harmful for most people in
Mhm.
general. The most recent research that I saw was like if you have really, really high social media use, it's bad. And if you have no social media use, it's bad. And you actually have like the best mental health if you have like a moderate amount of social media use. So
Yeah.
it's like that's not what cigarettes look like. So like it's different.
No.
But
Mhm.
there's still a question of like, is some of the choices made by these social media companies causing harm to people broadly? And I think yes, that's
Yeah.
clearly true because we've
Mhm.
got these like outrage machine algorithms
Yeah.
because they're prioritizing engagement. And we saw the like polarization survey where they just re-ranked people's Twitter feeds and that substantially changed like their feelings towards the opposing political side, etc.
Mhm.
So it's like those are clearly impacts that the algorithms have. Like none of the content in that was different. It was literally just rewriting it. So it's like
Yeah.
the algorithms themselves have an impact. But what is the responsibility of a social media company to not do that, basically, like legally?
Right.
And I think that's a hard question right now because we haven't really like dealt with that at all.
Yeah, like Section 230 is very, like is I honestly, I feel, insufficient to cover that. I can argue, I think that these companies should have liability under Section 234, like, the actions of the algorithm, but that needs to be made more explicit in the laws. Because it is very much you can't treat these like, a public forum or, it's like about people talking in a cafe or on the street or whatever. You almost kind of need to treat them like a newspaper
Mhm.
almost, where it's like, yeah, sure, like there's editorials in newspaper, people can contribute their opinions, but it's the newspaper that's ultimately responsible for like what's getting printed. I think like one of these articles mentioned about like Section 230, it's like we did have a ruling in November that um for this case, it looks like that the jurors must not only look at the content on the platform, but also the company's design choices, which I'm like,
Mhm.
yes, please do, because that's actually the important thing here. It, the content, sure, that belongs to whoever the frick posts it, but the design choices these companies make and how they are presenting that content is 100% their responsibility.
Yeah, I guess the counter analogy to the, like, Taylor Lorenz is, like, if it was something that didn't have,
Yeah.
like, rage-inducing content with the same design features. Like, if you put the same design features on Coursera, no one would be mad about it, was her argument. Therefore, it's clearly not the design features, it's the speech. It's like, I see where that's going, but if you flip it around and say, like, okay, what if we had Twitter but without the design features, where it's just like if you had sequential Twitter with
Yeah.
no algorithm promotion and no infinite scroll, you had to click next page and wait
You
three
mean
and
early Twitter? You mean
early Twitter,
early
you had to click
Twitter?
next page and wait 3 seconds
Yep.
for your next
Yep.
page of
Yep.
tweets to
Yep.
load. Like
Hmm.
that would also be very different. So
I mean,
like
yeah, you're describing Tumblr,
yes.
basically. But
Um
yeah.
so yeah, it's like I think there's an impact there. And like my concern with the algorithmic promotion is editorial and therefore sort of doesn't fall under Section 230 argument, which I have a lot of sympathy for, is the okay, but literally nothing is not algorithmically promoted at this point. And therefore, if you do make social media companies fully liable for anything their algorithm touches, they will simply not promote anything that is remotely like
Controversial.
controversial, which
Yeah.
seems bad also. So like where I keep coming to is like I think we need to come to an agreement that like having online social media for like a public forum is a public good. And
Mhm.
somehow we need to administer these platforms in a way that has the public good as the primary like motivation. And I don't know how that
Yeah.
happens,
Yeah,
but
yeah, the problem is I feel like the only way that that kind of, like, quote, unquote, "happens" is for them to essentially become, like, either nonprofits or government entities, and then you get into the issue
yeah,
of
yeah,
state-run media.
yeah, I saw someone pitching state-run social media, which
Yeah.
I like. uh, Given the current state, I don't know how I feel about that, but like the
Mhm.
advantage to that at least is that then it is subject to the First Amendment restrictions.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Then it is censorship.
then it is censorship. Yeah, so I think there's something there, and I think some state government should like give a bunch of funding for them to build
Yeah.
Washington State Twitter or whatever. So, and that would be an interesting experiment. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
but
I feel like the flip side of it is it being nonprofit, um, because I feel like then at least, like, you're disincentivized from all of the, like, profit motivating aspects of social media
yeah,
because
I mean, the problem, of
d
course, then being that it costs money to run a social media
it
platform.
does cost money to run a social media platform, but, like, I mean, not that it's way more expensive to run social media, but like Wikipedia kind of as an
Yeah,
example though, um, which yeah, it's like have it be funded by grants, then have it be funded by because that's one place where you can kind of get it into this like okay, like the state can support it, the state can kind of give them funding for it, but it is not in itself a state entity.
yeah,
Is sort of like where you
yeah.
can
I
sort of
think
have that line exist.
that something like that for me would be the
Mhm.
ideal direction to go, and
Yeah,
that's why I'm concerned about a lot of the just like social media is poisoning the youth, social media addiction narratives, because that's not going in that direction. That's just saying let's
yeah,
ban all social media. Let's stop it.
no.
Like we should not have online discourse at all. It's bad. People learn things when you have discourse, and that seems bad.
That's
So
very bad. Yeah, let's
so
not go that direction.
so yeah, like that's my concern is like I do think
Mhm.
that the social media companies as they exist now are making harmful design choices that are bad, not only on an individual level, but on a societal level. And I think that's very
Yeah.
apparent at this point in time. And we need some different solution with different incentives.
Yeah.
But in order to like get resources behind a different solution with this different incentives, we need the people in charge to acknowledge that social media is good sometimes or can be
Mhm.
good, is a useful way to have like online discourse and to disseminate information,
Yeah.
which I think is also clearly true. But
Right,
like
right.
that's not the discourse in a lot of cases. It's ban all kids from using all social media forever.
Really,
Or
you just gotta point them to any single earthquake in the state of California to see how social media is good. Like, the number of times it's been like, "How did I find out if there was an earthquake in California?" Twitter, you
yes,
know? Everybody
yeah.
rushing to their phones being like, "Was that an earthquake?" Yeah.
hmm well, they
Mhm.
get less of that now because that's because Twitter's
That's
broken.
true.
But I
Yeah.
saw Reddit was actually the big one for the videos coming out
Oh,
of Minnesota um,
that's good.
lately.
Yeah, Reddit was very much I like, very tangentially, even my little football meme Reddits were all, anti-ICE and posting information and stuff like that, which did warm my little heart to see
Yeah,
all these
Four
guys.
Four Media had some good articles on a bunch of the
Mm,
Reddits that are completely unrelated that have made anti-ICE statements. Did you see the one
mhm.
about cat bongos?
I did not see the one about cat
Yes,
bongos.
well, r/cat bongos, a subreddit about playing your cat like a bongo, is moderated by one person who owns the subreddit, and therefore they got to be like, I'm making a statement that if you support ICE, I don't want you on my subreddit
That's
about cat
amazing.
bongos.
About cat bongos.
So yeah, that's reassuring. And then, like I said, I
Mhm.
think it is reassuring that, like, I think the very first video about Alex Preddy was posted on the Minneapolis subreddit, and
Yeah.
that just disseminated. And also, there were
Mhm.
enough videos that people found, and they seemed to be authentic enough that there
Yeah.
wasn't really much of
Yeah,
a
like,
discussion
it
about
was
that. So,
honestly, it was really interesting because, like, for a while, like, in the immediate aftermath of the events, like, people were just kind of like, "Oh, hey, like, where is the video from, like, this one person that I saw in other videos?" And they were kind of able to track down that, like, source of information as well, so they had a very complete picture of the scene and what happened and everything.
mhm,
So it's like, yeah, it was weirdly heartening to be like, no,
yeah,
no, no. Even in this age of like, yeah, like algorithms and people disseminating lies about things, it's like people on the internet want to know the truth and they will seek it out and find it, and that's a
yeah.
heartening thing.
And like the truth did disseminate extremely quickly, and
Mm-hmm.
despite the federal officials trying to lie to everyone's faces about it. So
Yeah,
like that
yeah,
that was heartening. The fact that they did try and lie to everyone's face about it was extremely
not so
disheartening.
heartening,
But
but
um
yeah. The
but the
other part
fact
of
that
it is
yeah,
good.
like
Social media is good actually sometimes.
yeah, social media is good actually sometimes. So yeah, that's
Hmm.
my main takeaway from this is like,
Hmm.
yes, I actually agree that the companies are making harmful choices here and should be held accountable in some ways and forced to not do that. But also, I think social media is good sometimes, and it's a matter of
Hmm.
how it's designed and how it's used, and we should
Yeah,
figure out how to incentivize it to be better and
yeah.
not
It's
just
kind of
like
like
ban it.
yeah, it's like the internet is good sometimes. It's like we don't ban the internet. It's like it's a tool. It is how we use it, and so you really shouldn't just be banning it outright.
Yeah, and again, back to the problem with capitalism. The problem is
Yeah.
the profit incentives from advertising driving engagement.
Mhm.
Is like that's the core incentive for a social media network that is trying to make
Yeah.
money, is to drive more page views so they can get more advertising revenue, and they don't have incentives to say promote opposing viewpoints such that people get a balanced sense of
Mhm.
what is happening in the world, or promote moderate takes that no one really like has any strong feelings about. um,
Mhm.
and that's like how everything gets radicalized, how the discourse becomes so wildly skewed. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how those lawsuits go. I don't know
Yeah.
what I'm hoping for exactly. I would like to not resolve that social media is addictive and any company that is trying
Right.
to perpetuate it is like a pusher, etc.
Right.
Ideally, I would like a more nuanced take that is like, okay, when we're looking at like the actual internal documents of these companies, like Meta notably has had internal documents leaked to people being like, yeah, we did some research and like people do get more negative anger inducing things promoted more often, and that drives
Mhm.
engagement. And we're not going to do anything about it. Like that should be
Yeah.
bad. Like,
Yes.
but again, it's obviously bad. But in order for that to be illegal, there needs to be some responsibility that social media companies have to not do that. Like,
Mhm.
there's currently no law that says like you can't irresponsibly not make really people really mad all the time. Like that's
Yeah,
and that's why
which
they're
there should
leaning
be.
into the addiction narrative, I think, and like the depression and self harm
See,
angles. So,
honestly, I feel like the better comparison would be leaded gasoline because leaded gasoline did have, like, statistical evidence proving that it increased aggression in people living in, like, urban areas and what have you, and now
mhm.
we have unleaded gasoline everywhere, so
Yes, that's also a chemical substance that they're
it
introducing to
it is
people's
it is
body,
a
though.
chemical
So,
substance, but I feel like it's a more comparable chemical substance than, like, nicotine addiction and stuff like that.
yeah. Um, but yeah, it's a complicated thing, and
It is, yes.
it's, people are not known for having nuance. So I'm a little bit worried
No.
about it. But I am glad that there's at least like someone is taking this angle, and we will see how it plays out in
Yeah.
courts, because I do think there are irresponsible actions taken by social media companies here that we should try and address in some way. So,
Mhm.
all right, our last topic is OpenAI losing the race? Which is a little bit of a provocative title, but it's a question that people are asking now. I did
Mhm.
link this post on the artificial intelligence subreddit titled "OpenAI is heading to be the biggest failure in history. Here's why." And I've seen a lot of general posts along those lines in the last few weeks, and so I wanted to talk about some of the things that are driving that a little bit. Um, Definitely one of them is them launching ads, which
Mhm.
we talked about that a little bit, that Sam Altman said in a quote as of October 2024 that I kind of think of ads as like a last resort for us as a business model. So here, not even a year and a half later, they have reached
Yeah.
their last resort as a business model, or they just changed their mind on what they think the last resort is. But like, it does kind of seem like that's pretty fast to reach your last resort, sir.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of that was having to do with Sora also, which people were talking about when they launched it to start with, as it basically just being a place to put ads. Seems like a bad strategy from that perspective, because it's also just like a huge money sink. Because it doesn't have ads in it right now, and it costs a whole lot to generate videos. So, and in fact, right after they launched Sora, Sam Altman was just like, "We're going to have to figure out a better model, because it turns out most people are just generating videos to share with like 5 people in their group chat or whatever, and not
Yeah.
creating free content to market to the masses such that you get the engagement of the millions of eyeballs that you're wanting for your
Mhm.
ads, basically." Um,
Mhm.
and then yeah, Sora. Speaking of Sora, it's not doing that well apparently. The Sora's mobile app downloads plummeted 45% in January to 1.2 million installs, following a 32% December decline, per app figures data, says this TechBuzz article. Basically, people got really excited about it at the beginning when it was a novelty, and we're using it a whole bunch, and then have basically not since then, which is a trend that you could predict. Some of the other stuff is that people were like, this is a bad sign, is specific quote. OpenAI's CFO just announced they want licensing stakes, IP agreements, and profit sharing on discoveries made using their models.
Oh boy.
Drug development first, but everything else being on the table, which is great, cool, fun, it's funny. Like back when DeepSeek was launched, and they like OpenAI was mad at DeepSeek for maybe distilling their models, which is basically just like getting a whole bunch of outputs from OpenAI's thing, and then training a smaller model on that, and therefore like leveraging their work to build their model. A lot of people were like, "Oh no, someone is using your work to build their product? How could this be, OpenAI?"
Yeah.
So similarly, I think OpenAI being like, "If you use our model for something, we want an IP stake in it," is extremely funny. So,
Mhm.
because guess what, OpenAI? Guess what all of your product is built on? Is it other people's IP? I think it's other people's IP.
Yeah, it's like, well, are you giving them their cut? No.
No, you're not. I mean, they are in some cases. They have licensing agreements with some people now,
Yeah,
um,
but still, not
but
enough.
yeah. So that's another thing where people were like, okay, so you guys are just like casting around for how you make money here,
Mhm.
which also indicates it's not going that great for them. Traffic has declined to ChatGPT for 3 straight months, apparently.
Oh boy.
It has been going down since their code red in December, when Gemini launched, basically. Like, they've been
Mhm.
losing share to Gemini a lot. And then they've also, I think, been losing market share to Claude. And
Mhm.
the most interesting chart I had here is this LinkedIn post from Mercury, which is basically a fintech. They're a bank for startups. And so they
Mhm.
have a lot of startups on their platform, and they can go look at the charges that these startups are making on their Mercury cards or whatever. So they have made this chart basically of who between OpenAI and Anthropic was the first one that a startup used, basically.
Mhm.
Um, and if you look at back in, like, for all of, like, Q4 2022 through Q1 2025, it was pretty consistent with Anthropic around 25%. And in the last year, it has jumped up dramatically, such that the most recent Q1 of 26, which is not done yet, but so far, is at more like 70% Anthropic.
Yeah.
They broke 50% in Q4 and are now beating it out substantially. And they make the point, which I do think is true, is that Anthropic won all of the developers' hearts with Claude Code. And if you're building an AI-based product using APIs, you are probably a developer. And if you are a developer who likes Claude Code, you might go to Claude's APIs first to build your actual
Mhm.
product too. And, like, that's true, I think. I've personally done that, not just because I like Claude Code, because I like Anthropic more generally. But there's a lot of things where it's just like, okay, if I'm doing just like something basic, like reading a PDF and processing it using AI and like interpreting that data and outputting it into some other structured format, which is a pretty common thing that a lot of startups are doing. I've done it for like 3 of them now.
Mhm.
It doesn't really matter what model you use. Any of the LLMs will probably do fine at it. Some of them will do slightly better than others, but especially between like Gemini or OpenAI or Anthropic's models, there's not a lot of difference. And if you're a startup, you're not using it enough for it to really matter if you're paying like half a cent or 0.75 cents for every time that you do it. So you just pick the one that you like. And if you're a developer and you're picking the one you like, you pick Anthropic.
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense. And so Anthropic is getting in on startups pretty fast, and in general on places where developers are making choices. Um,
Yeah.
will that be consistent as the startups grow? Again, like, you can't tell. So, but I do think that's a very interesting trend that this graph is showing.
Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't include the whole, stir up about NVIDIA on this as well. Apparently, the Wall Street Journal published a story on Friday claiming that NVIDIA was looking to scale back its investment in
Oh,
OpenAI.
yeah, that
Yeah.
I didn't actually see
Um,
that one.
oh, yes, yeah. Like, apparently, the NVIDIA CEO has already kind of, like, cautioned and said, "No, no, no, that's not what's happening," but, it's like, it's still, apparently it's like he was talking and it was like emphasizing that their deal was non-binding and that he's privately criticized OpenAI's business strategy and impressed concerns about competitors like Anthropic and Google.
Yeah,
So, yeah, so it's like Huang apparently has like recently said it's like, oh, yeah, we're going to participate in OpenAI's latest funding round because it's a good investment, but it does seem like there's maybe a little bit more uncertainty around sort of the NVIDIA side of that whole circular funding model that we had looked at previously,
yeah.
which
The
is very interesting.
the other funny one that I didn't include in here, I forget, I may have mentioned it before, was that Microsoft has already spent like $500 million on Anthropic's APIs because they've just Copilot models are driven via a variety of things, but they've been using a lot more Anthropic models, especially since they sort of renegotiated their agreements with OpenAI, um, because people like them better, or
Yeah.
they work better in a lot of cases. So they've spent like $500 million on Anthropic usage already in the
Mhm.
last whatever 6 months or so since they started using them more heavily, which is like, again, and Microsoft has invested whatever number of billions of dollars in OpenAI. It's like they're very
Mhm.
invested in OpenAI, and like they're clearly trying to diversify things a little bit and like spread their eggs into more than one basket to some extent. But also, that's a lot of money to put into the competitor of someone that you put tens of billions of dollars into.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, it definitely is not, not fair weather signs in a lot of different places for OpenAI,
Yeah,
so which I
yeah.
couldn't be happier about it.
I will say, on the flip side, the thing about latest news about OpenAI's latest funding round I did see was news that Amazon was considering investing up to
Oh, yes.
$50 billion,
Yes.
which would be like half the round in that case, because they're talking about raising up to 100 billion in this latest round.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Um, which is interesting.
Yeah.
That's
That's
and that
also, like that sure is a move to make Amazon after you just, like, did your second round of layoffs
yeah,
post
like
retail peak.
And like they've been discussing for this for a while. I forget if we talked about it on the podcast again, but like the original reporting was they were considering investing like $10 billion.
Mhm.
Um, so that number has gone up as the negotiations continue to proceed. So it's not like they started talking about this at post layoffs, but they were
Yeah.
definitely continuing to talk about it while planning layoffs and also upping the amount of money they're talking about apparently. So that's cool. um, but also just like an interesting move to make as other people are being like, I don't know about continuing to invest more in OpenAI. Like Amazon has not invested in OpenAI previously. They have invested in
Yeah.
Anthropic, like $8 billion total, I think. So like
Mhm.
even the 10 billion number would have been more than they've invested in Anthropic to this point, and 50 billion is an insane number. We'll see if that actually like closes. Again, this is just like they're in negotiations, not that they're going to do it for real, but um, yeah,
It's hard to say these days with how weird the market is, but, it's like the market feels like it's a lot of vibes more often
yeah,
than not, and so it's like, I mean, if you're starting to attract bad vibes,
yes,
that's not a good sign for
yeah.
you in many ways.
That was gonna be the next thing I was gonna say too, which is like, do any of these things specifically mean like they're doing badly objectively and going to go bankrupt soon? No. Like they might not even they're doing badly in general. Like it might be a small dip and they might do fine, except for the fact that they're based primarily on hype. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you're losing your hype and you got to do something to turn around your hype or else
Right.
people are going to like continue to lose steam here. Like
Mhm.
it's a momentum FOMO thing, and like the moment people
Yeah.
start talking about like are they actually not doing well, maybe you have already
Mhm.
lost basically.
Yeah, yeah.
um unless you really pull it out with something super flashy and everyone's just like, oh no, OpenAI is great after all, but I don't know what they're going to do to do that.
I no,
So
I really cannot see anything that they could do that yeah, like, I mean, maybe they will, who knows, but, like, yeah, it definitely feels like it is very much like yeah, because like, it's all been Sam Altman's weird salesperson hype, and yeah, now he's, like, openly contradicting himself in weird ways, and yeah, like, just I don't know, people can smell desperation, you know? It's like,
yeah,
um, what is it? I think my VO coach likes to call it, like, emotional BO. It's like if you're really desperate for something, people can kinda sniff it, and it's not a
yeah.
good smell, and so I feel like it's like, yeah, that might ruin your wheeling and dealing a little bit, Mr.
Yeah,
Altman.
like that's because that's a huge thing in startups. Like when you're fundraising, you cannot seem like you need money.
Mhm.
Like, which is really annoying as a person who's tried to fundraise before. And because basically, if you're fundraising, it is because you need money.
Yeah.
But you must project that no, actually, you have all of the money you could possibly want, and this is going to be successful with or without their investment, and that they're just incredibly lucky to be able to give you money. Um, because that's the sort of thing that people want to invest in. They don't want to invest in
Yeah.
something that might fail,
Mhm.
that is counting on their money to succeed. Just want to give money to something that is going to be a huge success all the time. Which
Mhm.
again, it's like,
So backwards, and so ass backwards.
yeah, it's like maybe investors should have a little bit more spine also and be able to be like, actually, I want to support something that I think is risky because I
Mhm.
think it's worth putting my money behind something and therefore supporting it. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's also not the incentive for VCs to do. So
Mhm.
whatever. But yeah, I think very much you're not allowed to show any sign of weakness when you're fundraising is a huge
Yeah.
thing. Like the emotional BO. If you have any sign of you're not absolutely confident in everything all the time, it's much harder to fundraise. And like that has been Sam Altman's advantage is that he's been out here saying things like, "Oh yeah, we don't
Mhm.
know." what role money is going to play in the post AGI world, or yeah, I don't have a business model, and we'll just have like AI figure it out eventually, which is ridiculous, but again, displays a level of confidence.
Right, right. Yeah, it's like, "I don't need to figure that out right now. I will figure it out later." It's like yeah.
Okay. Um, but yeah, like it starts to show the cracks when people can
Mhm.
look back 15 months and see you saying, I think ads are a last resort, or look back 8 months and see people saying, like, I think doing erotic role play is gaming the numbers for engagement or whatever. And then you decide to do both of those things.
Yeah.
Um, so that people haven't forgotten.
Nope.
That's also the problem with being the company that everyone's paying attention to, because in a lot of the
That's true.
cases, you could just say inconsistent things, which is also how he's gotten away with stuff, I think, in the past. And like
Mhm.
that was a whole thing about when he got kicked out, was people saying that he'd been saying inconsistent things internally, basically.
Mm.
Not consistently candid quote
Yeah.
from the board as they kicked him out was related to a bunch of stuff like that, where he would just say different things to different people and hope they didn't talk to each other, um, which
Oh, yeah.
is not great, but also doesn't work when
Nope.
everything you say is on the internet for everyone to look at again.
Nope,
So,
nope. Honestly, what a happy little note to end on. Perhaps the beginning of the end for Sam Altman.
yeah, I mean, there's a long way to go down, and
Yeah,
hopefully it doesn't take too much of the economy with it.
that's very true.
um, but yeah, or at the very least, maybe they shift into like something less hype based and more fundamentals, which does not seem like it's what they're doing. But
Mhm,
I did see also that they're making a big push into more enterprise deals because they think they're losing to Anthropic there also. Unfortunately, enterprise are the companies that pay you, and you can have whatever 80% of the consumer market, which I think they still do.
mhm.
But also apparently like 95% of the consumers who are using ChatGPT are free users and are not paying them any money for it. So that means they have to spend the money on them and not get money for them. And then a $20 a month subscription from 5% of your users is not actually that much money.
Nope.
Um, as I know from a company that has had more or less that business model. But yeah, that's OpenAI. We'll see. To answer the question of the segment, I don't think they're losing the race yet, but there are some signs of the vibes being bad. And as mentioned, this is a vibes driven
Yeah.
business, so
Yeah, well,
that's
it's
not
like
a good sign.
they might not be losing the race, but their lead is definitely shrinking.
Their lead is shrinking, and
Mhm.
the trend is not looking good at the moment. So they will
Yeah, yeah.
have to turn it around with something, I think, if they want to
Mhm.
not start losing the race sometime
Yeah.
shortly. Thank you for listening to the Fast and Broken podcast. I'm Carly Rector, and if you'd like to support my work, you can subscribe to my newsletter at carlyrector.substack.com.
And I've been Teresa Kramer. If you want my voice on your products, you can visit my website at teresakramer.com.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, leave us a like or a review. It lets us know people are listening and helps more people find the podcast. See you next week.
Bye.